people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. We now know who Howling is going to be fighting in what will be her very first fight in the new year in March. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, as part of a King's Promotions show, she's going to be facing America's own Britney Sims. 34 years old, sporting a professional record of 7 wins with 3 losses, no draws, 4 knockouts, having been knocked out once in 10 professional bouts. Britney Sims, she's been around the block. She's been in there with Melissa Odessa, Makia Krebs, Rihanna Rios, who we talked about in my previous video. Now she's going to be in there with Howling. Sports an unblemished record of 8 wins with no losses, no draws, 2 knockouts, coming off of what was the most productive year in her entire boxing career since having debuted as a professional way back there in 2020, I think it was. Brie has only managed to fight once a year for the most part, but last year she managed to get out there 3 times. The added advantage of inking that promotional pact with King's Promotions. King's Promotions is one of the smaller promotional outfits, one of the local outfits here in the United States. Good enough to keep an unbeaten up-and-comer busy while they build up their record.
She's building up hers.
Is Britney Sims a step up for Brie Howling? Is this a better fighter than the fighters that she's fought so far?
Sort of.
I wouldn't call Britney Sims a gatekeeper just yet. I wouldn't call her a professional opponent. I mean, she does have a winning record, more wins than losses. She's currently on a 5-fight winning streak, last in action in September of last year, returning to action in March of this one. I get the sense that Britney Sims may be able to push Brie a little harder than she's used to, just a little.
Though not so much that she's in over her head. Need I remind you, Britney Sims was stopped by Melissa Parker, outpointed by Makia Krebs and Rihanna Rios. Brie Howling should do all right.
I think she'll be all right in what will be her very first 10-rounder. 3 common opponents between them, between Brie and Britney: Beata Dudek, Nancy Franco, Noemi Bosques. Been fighting a lot of the same girls. Now they're fighting each other to advance in their professional boxing careers. The interesting thing about Brie is, even though she doesn't come from some deep amateur background, she didn't represent Canada in the Olympics or anything like that, you'd never know it to look at her. She has the look of a much more experienced fighter than she actually is, and I know that she serviced as a sparring partner once or twice for undisputed champion Alicia Baumgartner, so that's good experience. Coming off the most productive year of her boxing career so far, she's got momentum.
The more you do something, the better you get at it.
A lot of the time, from one fight to the next, Brie Howling might have been coming off of several months and upwards of a year of inactivity. Here, she's been fighting, she's been winning, she's been active, and she'll be about as sharp as she can be for Britney Sims. In what will be her very first fight of this year. I don't get the sense that Brie Howling is ready to fight for a title just yet. There are 3 champions at this weight, all of which are more experienced than she is.
Now, I don't think she fights for a title this year, but she might get in position to fight for one this year.
To get her ready, and we'll find out shortly if she's ready for the likes of Britney Sims in March. We'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. In men's welterweight news, Jaron Ennis is presented with a potential opportunity to unify at welterweight, and there is added pressure to do so based on what he turned down. He turned down a fight with Virgil Ortiz at 154, with the reason being he wants to unify at 147. So that's what he better do. Jaron Boots Ennis has insisted that 2025 will be a tremendous and blessed year, with welterweight unifications seemingly remaining at the forefront of his mind. The 27-year-old comes off a unanimous decision victory in his rematch with mandatory challenger Karen Chukadzian, producing a somewhat underwhelming display to retain his IBF crown. But despite his lackluster performance, Boots has nonetheless kept himself in the shop window for a showdown with one of the remaining champions at 147 after ruling himself out of a junior middleweight contest with Virgil Ortiz, who will instead face Israel Madrimov February 22nd. Ennis has doubled down on his desire to secure more belts, so much so, in fact, that he appears to have turned down another lucrative opportunity against Teofimo Lopez after talks for a potential clash between the pair commenced towards the end of last year, but still, the Philadelphian has promised that 2025 will be a defining year for his career. Just 2 days ago, he wrote on X, 2024 was a good year, but 2025 will be a tremendous and blessed year for me. 2025, I'm in that mode.
It's mixed feelings as to whether or not he should have turned down the Lopez fight. Should he have turned down the Virgil Ortiz fight?
You see, the problem with fighting Teofimo Lopez is he had already turned down the Virgil Ortiz fight, with the reason being he wants to unify his division. So if you then fight Teofimo after that, well, that's not a unification match.
And he's a smaller guy. Those would have been bad optics. So you're saying you want to unify, you better do that. One welterweight champion who has expressed an interest in facing Ennis is WBA champion Stanionis. The Lithuanian, however, has struggled with activity in recent years, making just one defense of his strap since outpointing Radzav Butaev way back there in 2022. Nevertheless, the 30-year-old has insisted that he has no intentions of shying away from a unification with Ennis. Boots Ennis is one of the most dangerous fighters in boxing today, Stanionis said in a recent press release, where he also addressed fellow welterweight champions Mario Barrios and Brian Gortex. Brian
Norman. He's fast, powerful, and skilled. But I believe in myself and my ability to outlast anyone in the ring. The fans have been asking for this fight. I want to make it a reality. Unification matches like this define legacies. Sure enough, a dust-up between the pair would make for an intriguing clash of styles, with Boots looking to negate the unbeaten champion's aggression with his sharp counters. That said, Stanionis will be expected to make a mandatory defense against unbeaten Uzbek Shakram Gayasov at some point this year, representing a potential concern for Ennis. That is, unless they can convince Shakram to stand down, step aside. It just so happens that Shakram Gayasov is a matchroom fighter, just like Boots. So the ideal scenario would be, you get Shakram to step aside, have him fight on the undercard of Ennis versus Stanionis.
Against some ham and egg guy. Nothing too serious, nothing dangerous, nothing that jeopardizes his position as mandatory challenger. Let him get out there, make some extra money
On top of what you're paying him to step aside.
by having him fight on that undercard, the undercard of an Ennis versus Stanionis fight. That gives you the chance to introduce him to an audience that may not have otherwise seen him as the next opponent for the winner of the fight.
Shakram Gayasov, a standout amateur who's been with Matchroom for a while, is still flying low on the radar to a lot of people. A lot of people don't know him. Boxing on that undercard would introduce him to that audience.
Boxing!
While Boots settles up with Stanionis, who's been recently piping up about how much he wants unification matches. The other two champions are not available. Mario Barrios may be fighting Conor Benn. Brian Norman looks to be rescheduling a fight with Derek Cuevas. That leaves you only Boots
Boxing!
to settle up with. Coincidentally, Boots seems like he's the only champion who's really trying to unify this division anyway. Now, Boots versus Stanionis does not have the profile of a Teofimo Lopez fight, or the profile of a Virgil Ortiz fight. But let's look at this objectively.
Stanionis is a more proven fighter at welterweight than Teofimo Lopez.
For Jaron Ennis, a fight with Stanionis, that's a more credible opponent at 147 than Teofimo. Teofimo ain't done a goddamn thing at 147.
What about Ortiz?
The Virgil Ortiz fight, which to some people is a more risky fight, especially since it would be at 154. The problem with that one is there wouldn't be no title on the line. That's not a legacy fight.
It probably would have paid really well since Turkey would have been bankrolling it, but in terms of legacy, that ain't what that is. You move up there to 154, You're not a champion anymore.
Say you go up there and you actually beat this guy. You actually beat Virgil. What do you do after that?
If you actually beat him, what then?
Terence Crawford's not going to give you the time of day. He's got bigger fish to fry. Sebastian Fundora's all tied up with what's supposed to be an Errol Spence Jr. fight.
You're not going to get a chance to fight him.
Now, there is Bakram Murtazaliev, IBF champion, but that's basically saying you dropped your IBF to go fight him for his?
Stupid.
It's redundant. For that, you can stay in your own division and keep pursuing unification matches, which I understand.
Though some people don't.
The Stanionis fight is a good fight to me, mainly because I never had Boots on a pedestal to begin with.
I never thought he was as good as Terence Crawford. I never thought he was the second coming of Sugar Ray Leonard. I never thought any of those things.
Looking at him with a fresh set of eyes, seems like a good little fighter, a good fighter that still has a lot to prove. And by unifying today's welterweight division, he can prove it!
I don't mind a Stanionis fight, a Brian Norman fight, mainly because it's not a foregone conclusion that Boots wins. You see how he looked both times with Karen Chukadzian? Karen made him look human more than once.
So what could Stanionis do? What could Brian Norman do? Even if you favor Boots to win the both of those fights.
And I do.
There's still good fights. You have to look at this through the lens where Jaron Ennis isn't all he's made out to be.
And that's all right.
No, he's looked human more than once, and he doesn't have the deepest of resumes, now does he? To where him versus Stanionis is a solid fight. It's a solid scrap. And the welterweight division needs it. The welterweight division that sorely needs a shot in the arm and some action.
Yeah, I like that fight.
Now, Stanionis is a characteristically aggressive customer. A mid-range to inside fighter with decent defense. Pretty good.
Good.
Though not that big on power. I remember, this guy went the distance with Thomas Dulorme, of all people. Now, Jaron Ennis is a boxer-puncher. And boxer-punchers tend to do really well against aggressive fighters. Aggressive fighters like Jesse Kansopoulos.
Say Montes Stanionis.
Beta Ray Bill. So it's a situation to where Jaron Ennis can go in there and look good against an unbeaten fighter, an unbeaten champion like himself.
Unify a title at the same time. It's a win-win.
Jaron Ennis has his drawbacks. He has his flaws. His defense is not the best. It's a bit leaky, but standing right in front of him is not a good idea. Just ask Roman Villa.
He looked human with Karen.
But a Montes Stanionis fights nothing like Karen. He doesn't fight like Karen Chukadzian. He doesn't have Karen's feet, his movement. And that's what gave Jaron Ennis all those problems. I don't think he would have those same problems with a Montes Stanionis.
How good would it be for Jaron Ennis' stock if he went in there and stopped this guy that's never been stopped? He's never been beat.
I think it's a good fight. Good enough that I will not chastise Jaron Ennis for trying to unify the welterweight division. Somebody has to.
We don't need another dead division like the middleweight division has been.
I like this fight. In men's junior middleweight news, Hall of Famer Tszyu urges son Tim to train in Russia after his terrible form. Have time in discomfort. Tim Tszyu's father, Tszyu, wants his son to train in Russia following his poor run of form. Tszyu had a terrible 2024, having failed to win a single fight. Tim entered the year as WBO junior middleweight champion. He was also undefeated. Looking to unify against Sebastian Fundora, he was defending his WBO title while the WBC title was up for grabs.
We know what happened.
Would it be a good idea for Tim Tszyu to train in Russia with the Russians after having suffered a demoralizing loss to one of them? Is he so far along that it's too late?
I don't think so.
If he were to go over there now, get something started, and stick with it, it might make a difference, like how Emmanuel Stewart made a difference in Vladimir Klitschko's career.
Training in Russia with the Russians could make a difference in Tim's, but he's got to want to. I get the sense that the relationship between him and Kostya really isn't the best. It's my understanding that both Tim and his brother Nikita grew up without Kostya in the picture. Kostya was off just doing his own thing. He still is. Now he's offering Tim this opportunity. Tim could face a lower-ranked fighter in his next fight, but that risks pushing his career back further if he does not come through with a comprehensive win. Another alternative is to target a bigger name that has not been active. Jermel Charlo is the perfect opponent. They were meant to fight in 2023, but Charlo withdrew with a hand injury.
Now they are both coming off of losses. Jermel's coming off a loss to Canelo. Tim is coming off a loss to Bakram Murtazaliev. They both have ties to the PBC. Theoretically, you could do it, theoretically, but is that what's best for Tim?
I don't think so.
Going for the gusto a little bit too much is what finds Tim in this situation, this position, where he's on the bounce, he's on the rebound, and he has to reinvent himself. His father is offering for him to come to Russia. He said, I've already put the offer out. Obviously, they're big boys now and can make their own decisions, but I would love to take them both to Russia, take them into camp. I want to put them on the ground and give them a hard routine, the simple stuff, good but not flashy. Have them spend some time in discomfort, because sometimes being in a comfort zone, it gives you no advantage. Sometimes it's against you, Kostia said.
I don't think that's a bad idea, to be honest with you. To change your decorum, change your surroundings after what you suffered psychologically, you need to at least feel that you're doing something different so that what happened before doesn't happen again.
Training in Russia might be the change that Tszyu needs, all while his domestic rival, Michael Zerafa, is now piping up.
Oh, now you want to fight Tim? That he's coming off of 2 losses?
Michael Zerafa, who said, Tim has said that I ran from a fight with him. Now it's him who is running. I've heard him say a few reasons why he won't fight me. They're all just excuses. Honestly, everything aligns now. This is the biggest fight that can be made in Australia. I've made it really clear to everybody that I'm ready to go for April. I'm already training like the fight is happening. So the only delay now is from Tim's end. It's the only reason it hasn't been signed.
What a coward.
He ran from this fight. It's exactly the way that Tim says it is. They were supposed to fight years ago, and Michael Zerafa used COVID as an excuse not to fight, just for Stevie Sparks, a smaller fighter, to stand in his place. He wasn't worried about no COVID, so why was Michael?
Because Michael's a coward.
This is why I don't often romanticize boxers and boxing, because they're just as much opportunists as everybody else. And Michael is using these 2 losses that Tim has suffered as an opportunity to make him look bad. Oh, now you want to fight him.
Coward.
I don't really know what the future holds for Tszyu. I don't know if he can turn it all around. I don't know if he'll go to Russia. I don't know if he'll train with his father. But what I do know is whatever he has left is still enough to beat Michael, because Michael was never any good.
Michael was never cut from the same cloth as Tszyu. Whatever Tszyu has left, I think it's still enough to beat this clown.
So after a long time of doing whatever you feel like doing, wherever you feel like doing it, in the case of Tim, America, it's time to change things. And maybe he should go to Russia to train with his father. Tighten up.
Learn a few things you don't already know. Get out of your comfort zone.
And shut this loudmouth up. I think that a big part of Tszyu's strategy to get back in the winner's bracket should include Michael Zerafa. That's still a big fight in Australia. That didn't change.
Somebody might look at Michael Zerafa as a step backwards from the kind of fighters that Tim has been fighting, but he needs to do that. He needs to take his foot off the gas. Go back to where it all started.
Australia, your adoring public, all those fans that come out to see you fight and see you do your best, you need to remind yourself of what you're capable of and add a few things.
You just spent the last 12 months losing. You need to be reminded of what it feels like to win again. And you can do that against this scrub.
I hope he gives Michael what he wants.